I am in good physical health, exercise regularly, walk for 2 hours each morning, eat healthy meals, and meditate for at least 30 minutes a day. I have a pervasive developmental disorder. I am on an SSI, and I've never held a job. I see a psychiatrist once every 3 months for a status report. No meds are prescribed. I do not interact much with other people. My disposition is generally neutral, sometimes apathetic. I have not been recently depressed. As I write this, I am feeling slightly disconnected and experiencing an unusual headache that is probably related to the excessive dose I took. 10:30 a.m. I consumed 2 grams of paracetam, taken 3 times a day for the last 3 years for symptoms of PDD, and what was haphazardly estimated to be between 600 milligrams and 1 gram of mescaline. The mescaline was obtained by complete delimiting extraction of mescaline acetate from 100 grams of Peruvian torch. The extraction was consumed in its entirety, a tall mound slightly larger than a nickel of an off-white substance. I dissolved the powder in 2 ounces of water and drank it. The location was my bedroom in my parents' home, with my older brother present in the house and my youngest brother's girlfriend in the adjacent room. I had planned on requesting my brother's assistance should the need arise, but had not informed anyone of my intention. My parents were to be away most of the day at a funeral and then leaving for the weekend. My intention was to take the trip in private, if possible. My motivation for doing this is not entirely clear or compelling in retrospect. I had hoped to learn something about the way things are. I had hoped for the opportunity to see things in a new light. Things look basically the same. Whatever illusions I hold weren't magically shattered by the experience. I took notes starting approximately 45 minutes after the onset. 1:45, breathe. 1:47, that time dilation set in. Must have been a wee bit more than I had thought, just a bit. Hope you don't get hypoglycemic. Keep forgetting to breathe, or remembering to breathe. The lungs wander now, they can do their own thing. Whatever, let it go. 1:58, typing becoming laborious, disembodied fingers reverberating. 2:02, must have been at least half a gram in there. You need to remember to breathe, or your lungs will just do it for you? Who says they're yours anyway? The discrepancy is illusory, wave it away. All discernment is illusory. Maybe you took just enough. 2:09, just tell them you're in a separate reality where their rules don't apply. I stopped typing at this point due to transdimensional fluctuations. Letters appeared in the wrong order, orientation, and time sequence, and it was becoming difficult to correct. I was aware at the time that there wasn't much substance to my notes anyway, so it seemed like a wasted effort. I was beginning to disappear. At 2:15, I took a trip to the basement to seek help from B, as reality seemed to be tearing apart. I caught a glimpse of something that might have been profoundly terrifying. I was concerned that this was even before the peak, and that it might segue into a bad trip. This was my first serious trip. I had tried shrooms 8 to 9 years previously, but have not used any drugs in the last 7 years. My subsequent condition might have had real-world consequences, should reality see fit to intervene, so I thought that I should make contact with an emissary from reality, while this was still possible, for assistance in case of the unforeseen. The basement floor was alive with a network of bleeding, throbbing blood vessels. I spoke with my brother through intense muddled incoherence, reaching into brief pockets of reality, attempting to ground myself only to have that torn away in fiery blasts of delirium, the mind like feathers in a hurricane. We went upstairs to my room to check on my timer. It was about T plus 2 hours and 30 minutes, I think. I attempted to explain my intentions in taking the drug. It was difficult to locate the mouth. My explanations were rough. I was unsure of whether I was producing real words, or whether I had said them, or merely intended, or whether they were heard prior to being said. Whatever intentions I had set out with were by then saturated in mescaline. Nanny B appeared to confirm that words had been said. We made our way outside. I was dispersing. My brother told me to touch the dog, to feel his heart beating. He was real. To touch a rock, a tree, they were real. He suggested that my mind needed an object to focus on. When not forcefully engaged, my sense of being would begin to dissipate, and the mind would lapse entirely from any frame of reference. This was inevitable. I wobbled back to my room so we could check the time. My brother was uncertain of the appropriate level of concern, and briefly offered the possibility of calling an ambulance when it occurred to him that I may have taken a massive dose and had yet to peak. The offer was dismissed. Other brother's girlfriend, S, joined the audience at around this time. She seemed to have a more humorous disposition toward my condition, which I found reassuring. Intermittent portals to the external allowed for rudimentary communication, such as requests for orange fluid and soothing music. I felt a vague, distant nausea come and go. I spent over an hour grasping at threads of reality, trying to find anything to hold on to, unsure of what might happen if I gave in. At around 3.5 hours, my brother left to take a shower. Left alone, I finally let go, disintegrated, and instead of agony and chaos, what I found was indescribable. Ecstatic perfection, embraced by utter groundlessness. I closed my eyes, disappeared, and tore disembodied, egoless, through an infinite hyperdimensional cosmic mandala. I experienced what I take to be a pseudo-enlightenment. It was beautiful, ineffable, pure bliss. Trying to maintain a frame of reference had been the engine of impairment. All difficulty dissolved with the dissolution of the self. After returning to this world, intense hallucinations and feelings of deep satisfaction and connectedness continued for several hours. Everything I looked at was alive. Vivid overlapping iridescent translucent feathers swaying in the countertops. Phosphorescent wood grain, intricate prismatic patterns flowing, weaving, pulsating. Fragmentation, glowing multicolored halos. Flowers sprouting from the carpet, the hair on my arms dancing. Then it settled down to object melting. Intricate swirling graphic pattern overlay. Cryptic writing and numbers flying over every surface. Mayan letters, twisting, size, distance, and movement distortions, fractalization. The timer stopped at 9:59:59. I was still experiencing minor hallucinations, indistinct insects, colors changing, vague movement, and an actively distorted reflection in the mirror. I had difficulty locating my mouth until shortly before midnight. It seemed to drift about outside of my head. This was a transcendent spiritual experience, the benefit of which seems limited to the duration of the drug. This does not recommend itself to me as a reliable source of genuine spiritual insight, not for me, and especially not at this dose. It was not comparable in depth, clarity, or refinement to the dissolution of the ego experienced in meditative absorption. I feel no need to reproduce this experience, though I have little concern that it would entail the same kind of difficulty, having found what sort of a thing it is, and a more appropriate way to deal with it. I have no desire to do this, ever again. My first and last mescaline trip was the worst psychedelic trip of my life. Starting out relatively normal, but growing steadily more bizarre and frightening as it progressed. I had been planning on doing mescaline for a long time, but was unable to do it for various reasons. Anecdotal reports suggested to me mescaline would be a great psychedelic and easy to handle, almost impossible to have a bad trip on. I had experienced LSD 4 times before and handled it well, despite a few brief moments of terror. I thought nothing could hurt me. I guess I was a fool, waiting for the cactus gods to teach me a lesson. A few Friday mornings ago at 7 a.m., I consumed a lump of resin extracted from 15 inches of Bridge Z cuttings I bought on eBay. I estimate I must have consumed anywhere from 250 to 400 milligrams of mescaline. The first effect I noticed was a pulsating magenta-colored aura that cast itself over everything in my perception. Although music sounded better, I felt little to no euphoria. I gave Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix a listen, and I couldn't stop noticing how extremely sexual the music was. My thoughts became obsessively filled with images of beautiful women of different races, sensuously dancing and having wild sex. The thoughts didn't feel part of the trippy headspace of LSD. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but think them over and over again. I would even imagine these beautiful women deform into hideous, mustachioed transvestites with bizarre and distorted faces. I tried hard not to imagine my teachers, friends, and even family members in the same situations. The creepy and borderline incestuous images were annoying, but I just decided to roll with it. After the music ended, I sat down and tried to do some contemplation. I got into a nasty thought loop I must have worked through at least 10 times when I tried to figure out how to not objectify women or something to that effect. But everything was terminating in women having sex. I couldn't help but imagine women in all situations and places having sex with men and with other women over and over again. Breasts, penises, and vaginas were hard, moist, and vividly detailed. The final stage of my trip was the hardest to explain. It involved some kind of dark entity contact. I believe that everything in a psychedelic experience is happening strictly in the brain, but if I was superstitious, I would tell you that near the end of this trip, I unintentionally summoned a demon into the world. For as I was listening to Grizzly Bear's song, Sleeping Ute, a great blackness flooded into my field of vision, and an indescribable darkness moved through my heart. Something else had been there next to me for a moment, leaving a second after it came. I immediately felt immense guilt for what I had done, playing around with drugs and fucking around with dark spiritual forces. How stupid I was for doing this in my parents' house, inviting demonic forces into their lives. I had to repeat myself over and over that it was just a drug, and I got high. I felt like the loneliest person in the world, isolated from my family and the people I thought were my friends, who were completely unreachable now. At around 7, I came down with a pounding headache. A few hours later, I tried to fall asleep, but couldn't, finding that even after 14 hours, some alkaloids were still active in my system. The insomnia stayed with me until 6 in the morning. At this point, lying in bed, absolutely exhausted, but unable to will myself to fall asleep, I became immensely paranoid about the future. Would the insomnia last forever? Did I just damage my brain or ruin my life with this drug? I finally managed to catch a few hours of sleep and woke up feeling drained, but back to my normal self. For me at least, my experience gave off the vibe that mescaline is a creepy, even trashy drug that bizarrely parallels the LSD experience, whereas LSD thought loops typically terminate into that everybody is the same conclusion. Mescaline thoughts terminated into this freaky sex orgy world where every man and woman's ultimate purpose is to reach some state of unrestrained orgasm. And I couldn't help but feel this way for everyone. It was the most fucked up thing in the world to imagine people like my family in these situations. I imagined sex would be great on it if you did it with someone you really loved. I wish I could experience what other people have experienced on this drug. I am not going to mess around with mescaline anymore. I am glad it did not rip a hole in my psyche, and at least it sent a clear message to me not to do it again. I am not going to do psychedelics in my parents' house either, as I cannot repeat those experiences and guilty feelings. It's not fair to them. Although I am well composed otherwise, I still feel a bit filthy and want to reevaluate my relationships with other women, perhaps with the help of a psychiatrist. I am not misogynistic and have never hurt a woman. Nevertheless, I have had difficulties making genuine connections with women in the past. For me, the ultimate downside of psychedelics is this. People consume psychedelics with the hope of seeing a more beautiful reality, unrestrained by barriers of belief and concept. They want to believe that if we can only stop thinking and start truly observing, we would see that reality is more profoundly beautiful than with any labels we can give it. But what if, when the barriers were broken down, some of us saw reality as it truly is? A barren wasteland, devoid of any emotion or meaning. A dead landscape, dotted by hairy, weak, pustulous sex organs that call themselves humans, and waste their lives scraping around fruitlessly for an insight that doesn't exist, and evolution made no provision for. This is the ultimate question that my quality of life and my relationship with psychedelics hinges on. The next morning, I took every cactus product I had left and poured it down the drain or in the garbage. Please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment down below your mescaline experience. I know there's not too many bad mescaline trips out there. That's why I haven't done a video on this up until now. Alright, let's continue on with the next story. Mindset. The day before, I met my mother and we talked about my childhood issues. I learned that my family was covering an abuser. After the discussion with my mother, I had a need to trip the shit out of me. I chose to combine Mescaline HCl, first time, with a reversible MAOI and see what comes. The come up. After taking mescaline, I burned some incense and exercised a bit. I put on some music, mainly electronic. I wish to trip hard and get crazy. It puts me in some kind of ego mode. I paint on my naked body. It is the first time that I take mescaline, and I notice only weak effects compared to psilocybin or LSD. This judgment was wrong though, because mescaline comes up way slower. I decided to take the rest of the batch, all the powder that remained. This was a crucial mistake. As the effects slowly build up, I watch some porn. It looks awesome. The peak. The real peak comes maybe only after 4 hours since the first dose. I get diarrhea. I notice growing and deepening anxiety, strange feeling. I dance to the music for a while. My state is getting worse, feeling horrible. I lay on my bed, turn off all stimuli, and try to figure out what the hell is going on with me. I realize I've been in some ego mode, trying to cover something. I choose to listen and tune to the pain inside of me. It is progressively worsening. At one moment, I realize that I'm at the edge of freaking out. Wish I only had got some MDMA to soothe me, but I don't have any. I know that I have two options. I can call an ambulance and they give me benzos and I will be able to sleep. The second option is that no matter what arises in this trip, I will give my full presence to it. I chose the latter because I know what the hell I was feeling was only a memory of something that I needed to remember. I start crying, screaming, and weeping. Soon the moaning of myself sounds like a desperate little baby. My own sounds of moaning are just the most unbearable thing I had ever heard. And then the teacher shows me that this was my childhood. I see myself as a little baby with two immature, unavailable, and emotionally insecure parents who were unable to protect me and who themselves needed to be taken care of. I feel the pain of this baby who just could not be a baby. He had to be grown and adult in order to survive. I start screaming, "I just want to be a little baby." And my voice is so tender and childish. I cry the shit out of me. Expressing the pain helps a bit, but it does not stop the hell. I cannot sense any love. There is nothing to soothe me. I close my eyes and I see evil spirits molesting me. As a tiny baby, I am longing for Dad to protect me, but I am alone. The horror reached the bottom of the abyss. I trust that I can take care of myself. I trust my inner strength. I survived my childhood, so I'm gonna survive this trip. The diarrhea forces me to go to the toilet every half an hour. The come down. After 5 hours from the first dose, the effects and the horrors start to fade out like waves, but very, very slowly. I find nitrous. Hoping to comfort me, I start doing balloons. They calm me down, but only for a while, and then the next wave of horror feelings enter. So I repeat the balloons. I do like 10 of them, until I sadly waste all the cartridges. The diarrhea continues. I drink water and shit it immediately. I feel the need to be a child again, so I put on some cartoons for babies. They soothe me a bit, but the horror feeling still comes in like a wave and then fades away. I decide to treat myself as well as possible. I find a bottle of wine, but alcohol does not relieve me. I learned by telling to myself, "It's okay, you are going to be fine, you are safe, I will protect you." But I fall asleep only after 15 hours since the first dose, well in the afternoon of the next day. The aftermath. I got the lesson that mescaline comes up slowly and that the combo with MAOI is too strong. And I chose to face the truth during this trip and be unconditionally present with my wounds. I never regretted that. It was a landmark in the process of healing my trauma. I have a deep respect to this teacher, though I wish I had a sitter who would have taken care of me. I had obtained 2 510 mg gel caps with a very light yellowish-orange crystal substance, which I was told to be mescaline. At 1900, one was ingested. Friends D and K were along for the ride. They had found something new called Aura. They had no idea what it was, and I still don't. I am 24 and consider myself experienced in this field, though always learning. We had all went out for a walk in the park. I still wasn't feeling anything, while they were all very happy. After 1 hour in the park, I left the group to rest at home. I was tired from a day of putting up a wall and doing other various yard work, but still nothing from the mescaline. They returned about 24 minutes later, at which time we went downstairs to watch visuals. About 10 minutes into it, I became disoriented, which I expected, and went upstairs to rest. I then became very ill and knew I must induce reverse peristalsis. After that, the world grew bright with color. My senses were overloaded. I was in a constant struggle with my emotions and my understanding of life and who was getting to me. I knew I had done too much and was in for a very powerful ride. I was upstairs in my room in agony, struggling with how to get comfortable and the overwhelming flow of information. My friends had no idea what was going on and sadly didn't care. At different times of the night, I would attempt the walk downstairs and enjoy their company I'd so wanted, but alas, I would become ill from the amount of visual stimuli. It was now 2200. D and K came upstairs to let me know they were leaving to get some food. I couldn't go. As much as I wanted to, there was no way I could leave the house. I didn't want to be alone. I felt I couldn't be alone. I didn't feel it was safe, and I needed to know someone was close by. 2 of my best friends left me alone. This brought my world crumbling down. The first 10 minutes or so, I was paranoid, looking out the window every 20 seconds, calling them. Bedroom, living room, nothing worked. The whole time, I was jumping in and out of a world all too familiar and painful. I felt as though my head was going to implode. Note, I could tell it was not going to explode. Go figure. I had a slight amount of energy, but didn't know how to use it. I knew for a moment my body was actually boiling. All light was horrifying. I struggled for hours with the small LED on my television. I was having amazed close-eye visuals, but couldn't enjoy them because of the excruciating pain my body was in. There were moments in time when I would remember why I took this, but for the most part, I was not having any fun. I was in control, but I would feel myself drifting into another world, which I could do nothing about. I would see images, visuals of things in my memory. As if my mind was being infected before my eyes, I would see the once benign visuals turn into huge wasps, devilish bunnies, and people dying. I was still at the point which I knew I could stop this whenever I wanted, but it was borderline. I gave in. I ran upstairs and ingested 10 milligrams of diazepam to calm me. I waited. After 40 minutes, I felt very little from the diazepam. I was still in pain. I searched the web for ways to come down gracefully from this mysterious monster. Giving up quickly, I decided to take 10 milligrams of zolpidem tartrate. I felt as though I had given it my all, but couldn't last much longer. I retreated to bed, getting more and more horny, which I had been all night, but was slowly becoming more apparent. After some time, I fell asleep. Because of the Ambien, I have no recollections of the last hour before sleep or my dreams. I will take the other pill in twofold next time. The next morning, I'm glowing, tired, hungry, educated, but also sad. My so-called friends were disgusted with me. I was not around them last night. I left them alone so they would not have to deal with my unclear emotions. But when I asked them to just stay around the house, eat whatever you like in my place, they still left me in the dark. I apologize for the state which this was written. Though this is fresh in my head, I am still recovering from a very long night.